Have you ever stepped outside your comfort zone? Well, today I'm doing just that. I'm between episodes at the moment and thought I would try something new. And today I thought of going with the raw podcast rather than the polished to see how it works. Hello, I'm Philip Anderson. A very warm welcome to Talking Point. People have often said to me the one thing that's lacking in your podcast, Philip, is that human element. And I want to hear something warm and human-like. And just where you're chatting, you commit, but then we don't hear of you for weeks and weeks. First and foremost, I want you to know that, yes, I am dedicated. I am committed to the task. But allow me to explain something to you. When I was 10 years old, I suffered quite a serious injury. I fell 20 feet, if not 30 feet, from a tree in my local area and narrowly escaped with my life. And I mean narrowly escaped. You're talking of had it been an inch the other way, I wouldn't be here now. The tree itself was a favourite tree of mine. I'd climbed it several times. I'd make for that tree every time I went into the park. And we're talking quite a beast of a tree here, and a boreal giant is the best way I can describe it, with an interplay of branches spiralling into the heavens in spidery formation. And height didn't bother me either, and you didn't realise how high you were climbing because sometimes the ascent was that subtle until people's voices sounded that much more fainter on the ground and you thought, oh help, I am quite high up here. And one day I thought, well, let's have a game of hide the ball. And one of us would go up, hide the ball, come back down, and we would have to go up and find it. And then on this particular Sunday afternoon, about lunchtime, I don't remember coming down the tree. I must have blacked out because I have no knowledge of it, but my brain just cannot go back to that point. I can go back to the point of climbing it, and I remember having the ball in my left hand. I was hugging it to my chest as I was, navigating my way up this tree with my other hand. Now, you've got to bear in mind, I'm almost totally blind. So was doing it blind, but I have a very good sense of direction. I've got good spatial awareness. Mental mapping back then wasn't a massive issue. And the confidence I had, I was fearless, I suppose. A lot more risk averse nowadays, but fearless back then. But on that particular occasion, I don't remember what happened and how it was I ended up on the ground. I just remember not even waking up. I just remember I was walking down the path. My mother was there holding her hand and saying, where am I? What happened? What day is it? Just to give you an idea of the seriousness of it all and how it was I came to escape death by the narrowest of margins, had to do with the surface. There were two surfaces in that vicinity, one grass, one tarmac. Now, the tarmac was the main entrance path to the park. The tree was set about 2 feet or thereabouts away from the tarmac path, about 12 feet from the main gate. Apparently, when I landed, I struck the ground with the back of my head, and I was just 1 inch off the tarmac path. Yes, just 1 inch. Had I been 1 inch closer, I wouldn't be here today. And I was expecting a bruise. I was expecting to find a lump, and I didn't feel one. There was just a slight aching at the back of my head, but nothing else. I just know God was watching over me that day. And we went to the hospital and they x-rayed me, and I remember making a joke. I said, have you found what you're looking for? Meaning the brain. They said, oh, yes, and everything looks in order. Well, it wasn't until a few years later that I started experiencing problems with my memory. Retention became a big problem, and language formation became a problem. And some days it was as if I'd forgotten everything I'd learned about language, or almost the fundamentals. Well, I would struggle to put a sentence together. I would struggle to speak. I would struggle to articulate. Logic just didn't seem to exist. And I just got so frustrated at the time. And then the more frustrated I got, the worse it got. I was berating myself. Why can't I think straight? Why can't I articulate? Why can't I write? Why can't I speak? Why am I getting everything all in the wrong order? There are those who would argue that part of what I'm experiencing at the time can be attributed to my present state of mind. The fact that all my emotions are riding high. There's a lot of mental anguish. Everything's all in turmoil. And that is mainly to blame for all those cognitive interruptions. Well, I would like to think that that was true. But it happens too frequently for me to believe that. I'm 90 to 95% convinced it's linked to my accident way back when I was 10, just over 10 and a half. There is another explanation, not so much plausible in my eyes, as I know different, but perhaps plausible in the eyes of that of the medical professional, and that is hypoplasia, the very condition that was responsible for my congenital blindness, known as bilateral optic nerve hypoplasia. Bilateral meaning it affects both eyes. At the time of my birth, there was estimated to be 16 known cases of bilateral optic nerve hypoplasia. We're talking 1969. And 12 known cases of unilateral optic nerve hypoplasia, meaning it affects just one eye. And in recent years, in the course of my own research, I remember reading in a medical paper how in 95% of cases of children born with bilateral or unilateral optic nerve hypoplasia, there are other factors. And these can include intellectual disabilities. And as we know, these affect things like language and cognition. I could go and get it checked, I suppose, but parts of me just don't want to know in case they find anything else untoward. And it'd be something else for me to have to contend with. And at the moment, I'm coping with it, albeit slowly, albeit not very well sometimes, but I am coping with it because it's been present with me for many, many, many years. And it's just getting progressively worse. I remember going to my doctors when I was about 21 and saying, I can be walking up the road and all of a sudden I just stop walking. I forget how to walk and I just stand there and freeze. And I remember somebody else describing something similar to me. And we both came to the conclusion it's trauma-related, trauma that the brain suffers. And funny enough, I remember likening my own brain to one of those old coin-based phone boxes. You open it up and you see this array of circuitry going in all directions of the compass. And you think, well, what's going on here? Where does all this go to? Where does that lead to? And that's exactly how my mind is on those occasions where I'm inarticulate, unable to form my words, develop my language for that day. And all I can say is I may see the first two words, and I'm hoping whilst I'm saying those two words, my brain can piece together or build the sentence as I'm going, but sometimes it doesn't. Other times, on my good days, I can just quickly think of what to say. It retains the information and I can speak it. And then whilst I'm speaking that, it's thinking of the next thing and it's building on it and adding to it. On bad days, I can barely put the two words together. And the way I manage it is I go into hibernation, and I find it helps. I like to take myself away because I'm so exhausted mentally and physically that I just haven't the strength to produce anything, to write anything. A while ago, I used to let that bother me, and I used to get so frustrated, and I used to sit back and think, if only you knew. But I take myself away now when it occurs, when I can't articulate, when I can't verbalize what I want to say. And I end up having to just say to myself, look, stop fretting over it, stop overthinking it. I think over a few days, perhaps, I find that recuperation period helpful because it enables me to recharge my batteries. And I do come back fighting. I do think through solutions, what I can do to improve the situation next time, how to spot the signs. Sometimes there aren't any answers to it. You just have to accept. You just cannot articulate some days. And accepting it like that and facing it head on is what's helped me to come to terms with it. And I just wanted to share that with you because I didn't want you to think, I set these podcasts up, I come out with some great ideas and then you don't hear off me for a while. Well, I wanted you to understand really that there is a reason for it. And it's not been offered as an excuse. It's been offered so that you may understand. I hope it's resonated with you. And if it has, and you want to share something with me about your own experience, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe we could do a joint podcast on this at some point. And it's one of the first podcasts I've ever produced today where I've not edited it, and I have no intentions of editing it. I wanted it to be raw. I wanted just to see how it would be received and whether it would work as a podcast. It's very, very much a new departure from the usual talking points that I do. But as there's been a bit of an hiatus, more than an hiatus between the last episode that I did on accessibility with Calibre Audio and celebrating their 50th anniversary. There was part 2 to come out of that, and I have all the material for it, and it was due out in end of May, end of June. Unfortunately, I've had quite a bit of a relapse in terms of the problem I've just been talking to you about, and I've just had to take some time out, really, to recharge my batteries. But when it comes to audio, and I'm experiencing this problem, that is one of the first things to suffer is my audio, because it commands a lot of energy. It can leave me feeling very exhausted at the end of it. But it's one of the reasons why I don't do raw, is because I make too many mistakes, because there's lots of gaps in my thinking, and I can only go for so long before I start waning, really, and I end up forgetting what I'm saying, and I lose my train of thought very quickly. And so I can honestly sympathise with Joe Biden, who experienced something similar when he was involved in the election debate when he came up against Donald Trump. And he was having a bad day. He was unable to articulate. He wasn't, all that coherent, and everyone telling him he should, drop out of the, the running for the presidency and so on. trying to belittle him and, question his mental state of mind. My heart went out to him, really, because I did listen to the interview, but there was no arrogance to his tone, and I think there was an honesty to it. And although I'm not a fan, I do wish him well. Well, I hope that's helped you understand me a little more. I hope this podcast has been more human-like than some of my podcasts, where it's quite clinical. It's a totally different sort of setup, isn't it? This is a whole new departure for me, just doing something ad lib. I just come on and talk about something. I'm okay. The only thing that I had thought of was the topic, and that was about my accident, falling from a tree at the age of 10 and surviving. I'm glad I survived, as I wouldn't be here now talking to you guys about it. But let me know your thoughts if it's resonated with you. It's prompted you to want to share your own story with me. Feel free to get in touch. My email address is info@talkingpoint.site. And if it is, you think the podcast has worked, would you like to hear more of these type of unpolished, raw type of productions? Let me know. But in the meantime, I will be back with my part 2 of the other podcast on accessibility very, very shortly. But thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for your understanding. Bye-bye for now. If you enjoyed this episode, do hit the like button or leave a comment in the comments box below. If you've not subscribed, can I encourage you to do so? It does help others to find me.